This is an ABC News special edition of Nightline.
Its lens may be smaller than a dime, but cameras like this are causing a big fuss.
They spent 5 days inside a home capturing scenes of abuse and neglect on hidden camera.
It looks like a scene from a third world slum, or perhaps a prison camp.
But when he went to work rolling the odometer, we were rolling too, with hidden cameras.
In Barbados, as in Washington, the game is the same. Lawmakers and lobbyists playing ball together.
Many television journalists insist there are important stories that can be told no other way.
Investigative reporting that, in fact, has, for years, benefited the public. We've got to have journalists in there doing this.
This man is a paralyzed Vietnam vet. For 3 days, no one fed him.
But to critics and to many of our viewers, deception is never justified.
We taped this small television camera right to his helmet. We told him, follow some of these cars. Let's find out where they're going.
You have to snoop, cheat, and lie to get a story. The public says they don't go along with that.
We hadn't been in this North Carolina meat department long before we saw old fish being rewrapped and sent out for sale again.
And now a North Carolina jury has said ABC News must pay $5.5 million in the wake of a hidden camera investigation.
We got ABC for fraud, trespassing, and breach of loyalty.
We were just really trying to just send a message across. If you're going to do it, just do it legally.
Leaving tough questions about the kinds of stories journalists report and the methods they use to report them. It's all a matter of hidden cameras and hard choices.
This is ABC News Viewpoint. Hidden cameras, hard choices. Now reporting live from Waite Chapel on the campus of Wake Forest University, Ted Koppel.
As most of you probably know, this is not the first time that we have done one of these Viewpoint programs in which we assist our critics in putting ourselves on the griddle. Over the past 15 years, we have produced 29 previous Viewpoints, and inevitably the question of fairness arises. Some of these panelists, after all, are longtime colleagues and friends. Diane Sawyer, the co-anchor of Primetime Live. We've known each other for more than 20 years. Don Hewitt, who invented the television magazine program, is the only executive producer that CBS's venerable 60 Minutes has ever had. We've been friendly rivals for over 30 years. And then there's Roone Arledge, the president of ABC News. We've been friends for 20 years, but more to the point, for all of that time, he's been my boss. I work for Roone. So if I was sitting on that side of the panel, if I were the director of corporate communications for Food Lion, as Chris Ahern is, if I had been Food Lion's chief outside counsel during their lawsuit against ABC News, as Richard Wyatt was, I'm not sure I'd be altogether comfortable having me as the moderator of this program. Bob Lissett, who's an associate professor of journalism at Syracuse, worked for 17 months as a consultant to Food Lion's attorneys. We knew each other in the old days when he was a producer at ABC and before that NBC News. I can vouch for his fairness. I hope he'll do the same for me. As for that lanky, cheerful-looking gentleman at the end of the row, he used to be U.S. Senator Alan Simpson. Now he's a visiting professor at the Kennedy School Shorenstein Center at Harvard. He wrote a book titled Right in the Old Gazoo, A Lifetime of Scrapping with the Press. I'm one of Senator Simpson's scrappees. So if you ask, am I objective tonight, the answer is no, of course not. But if you ask whether I can treat the issue of hidden cameras and undercover journalism objectively, I'd like to think the answer is yes, but you'll have to be the judge of that. We have come here to North Carolina tonight precisely because it is not New York or Washington or one of those other cities presumed to be in the mainstream media's back pocket. Salisbury, North Carolina is, like so many towns in the South, built alongside the railroad line. It is small. Only about 25,000 people live here. It is proud. A statue dedicated to Confederate soldiers stands in the middle of town. And it is quiet. A high school basketball game is one of the highlights of a Friday night. But Salisbury is also a company town, a Food Lion town. The grocery store chain began here in the 1950s and is headquartered here today. It is the town's biggest employer.
Everybody's very supportive of Food Lion, very supportive, because they've done so much good in the community on that.
Food Lion has made a lot of millionaires in this area.
What about out-of-date ground beef already turning brown? This man is throwing it back into the grinder to be mixed in with the fresh ground beef.
When ABC's Primetime Live aired its 1992 story accusing Food Lion of unsanitary food handling, the company's stock plummeted 15% overnight. And many people here took it very personally. They believe ABC's reporters set up the story, and they are still angry about it. Just ask any player at the weekly bridge club.
It hurt a lot of people in North Carolina, what Diane Sawyer did. A lot of people lost their jobs. The stock went to nothing. That's not right to single out one store.
You had reporters who came in and just broke every law that I would see as being right by trying to set up conditions which were unreal and unfair to Food Lion. And this is what I resent, and I resent terribly.
Boy, you probably wouldn't want to interview me because I'm completely against all the hidden cameras and all the news media pulling up all the dirt on.
That sentiment echoes around town, from the shoe repair shop to the Levi's store, to the courthouse, to the Big Pig restaurant. Few people in Salisbury support journalists who go undercover or who use hidden cameras.
Using a hidden camera still looks like you're up to no good. You're trying to catch someone. That's your primary purpose. You're trying to catch somebody in some wrongdoing. And if you stick around long enough in any capacity, you're going to find somebody doing something wrong sooner or later.
I don't like to see people sneak around and do anything. If you're going to do something, be straightforward up front.
Using hidden cameras is an invasion of privacy for the simple fact that no one knows.
It's not straight. You're doing anything undercover, it's crooked. I really believe that.
We hadn't been in this North Carolina meat department long before we saw old fish being rewrapped and sent out for sale again.
Few people we spoke to believe journalists are the best professionals to uncover abuses.
If the wrongdoing is a true wrong, well, of course, it's a matter that the proper officials should investigate it. And those avenues are always open to any complaining party.
We don't need a society to where the ABC News, NBC News, any network tries to do regulators' job in that given state.
And the motivation for a journalist to go undercover? For the residents of Salisbury, that's pretty clear.
Sometimes whatever they're covering is for the best interest to the public, but sometimes I also think the media or whoever does it just to get ratings.
It's just making a living, making a profit, elevating themselves in the business. That's why they do it. There's very little idealism involved in it.
You can't just go in and ruin a business for a headline. And that's what they done. And they didn't care anything about who it hurt, what it did to any business. All they wanted to do was get a big rating. And they'd do anything for it. And I'm convinced of that.
We did find some people in Salisbury who defended journalists who go undercover, but they were few and far between. One more thought before we take a break and begin our town meeting. Clearly, we are here because of the Food Lion case, and I fully expect that some of the issues raised by that case will be discussed here tonight. But we are all of us here determined to move beyond the case and to talk about the hard choices raised by hidden cameras and by journalists posing as something they are not. We'll get underway after this break.
This ABC News Viewpoint, Hidden Cameras, Hard Choices, is being brought to you by AT&T, your true choice. is ABC News Viewpoint. Hidden cameras, hard choices. Now reporting live from Whitechapel on the campus of Wake Forest University, Ted Koppel.
I know that not all of you who are watching this program tonight were watching the primetime live program that preceded us at 10 o'clock this evening, but certainly our friends from Food Lion were here early enough and were watching the program tonight. I know you're just busting to say something about that, and I'd like to give both of you an opportunity to do that before we go to our questioners out in the audience. Who wants to pick it up? Mr. Wyatt, Ms. Ahern?
Yeah, Ted, let me make a couple of comments. One, I had watched David Weston's final remarks in rebuttal to Food Lion's remarks.
David Weston, the president of ABC.
That's right. David Weston made a tremendous error, I think, and a misstatement when he quoted Judge Tilley in this case, and I thought I should set the record straight. I have actually brought with me the quote from Judge Tilley on the issue of staging, and I thought to clarify the record, I would note that on December...
I'm going to let you do this on this one issue, but what we are not going to do here this evening is retry the case.
No, I understand.
So go ahead.
But Judge Tilley, just to be accurate for the purposes of the record, Judge Tilley said on the issue of staging by the ABC reporters that certainly there was evidence in the record from which the jury could determine that staging by ABC's reporters in the period of time they were Food Lion employees took place. So what David Weston said really was an inaccurate characterization of Judge Tilley's testimony, and I thought we would make the record clear on that point.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Ms. Ahern.
Well, I think that we did see portions of the broadcast that aired in 1992, and I think we saw some portions on tonight's primetime program, which we know to be false, and we know they continue to be false as they were in 1992, and we're very surprised to see some of those portions re-aired when evidence that has turned up in discovery directly contradicts those issues.
Okay. Let us go right to the first question. Microphone A. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening. My name is Justin Catanoso, and I am a reporter in Greensboro with the News and Record. I also teach here part-time at Wake Forest. My question is for the journalists on the panel. Don't hidden cameras promise often more than they can deliver? In the Food Lion case, for example, we never get to see the rat-and-all cheese. We don't see the out-of-date meat wrappers. You let yourself open to the charges that Food Lion makes, that you have lied about what they're seeing. If you are more interested in journalism than entertainment in pursuing the story, are there not other methods to get the information you need, like buying Food Lion meat over a period of time and testing it to see if it is indeed healthful?
Diane, it was your story, so I'm going to let you respond to that first.
I will, and I do it with some trepidation that you're going to wrap my knuckles if we get back into the Food Lion case.
If you
too
get
much
too far into it,
detail.
yes.
That's right. I know what it's like to have your knuckles wrapped by Ted Koppel. Let me just first address the issue of having the meat tested, and I'll talk generally, if I can, about this kind of situation. As we know, and I've done other stories on this, sometimes meat comes from the manufacturer. Chicken, for instance, comes with salmonella. So let's say you had it tested. You wouldn't then be able to determine what the original source of the contamination was. So I'm not sure what you could say in each instance about what it demonstrated solely about food handling in and of itself. On the larger issue of do hidden cameras promise more than they can deliver, we had both things. We had sources, and we had what the camera saw, what our journalists, what our producers saw firsthand. And we took both of those things in tandem. And you heard from sources and some of the things they saw. We never represented to you that we saw anything that we did not see.
Now, anyone over here want to respond to that? Go ahead, Bob Lissett.
Yeah, I do. One of the questions, part of the gentleman's question was, the very beginning was, I'm sorry, it was you, Ted. You said, Diane Sawyer, it was your story. As we know in magazine shows, it wasn't Diane Sawyer's story. It was the story done by two producers. I doubt that you saw the 43 hours of videotape. If you had, I think the story would have been a different story, and I think it would have been fair because I think you're a good journalist.
Well, I want to say that the journalists who are good journalists, who were the producers on this story, are also, in every respect, equal reporters. I'm sure the attorneys here, for instance, have people who work with them, and they then don't go and redo all the work the people who work with them do.
But you didn't see the 43.
They are good.
I
you
think
didn't see the 43 hours.
I think it might be helpful. Bob Lissett makes an interesting point. Roon, if perhaps you would explain to people out there how on a magazine program, on Primetime Live, for example, you have Sam Donaldson and Diane Sawyer and Chris Wallace. But in fact, you have lots of producers who go out and work on these stories. Maybe just a little bit of background would be helpful.
Well, we have producers and we have researchers and writers and the great television journalists. You mentioned two of them, Sam and Diane, get deeply involved in these stories themselves. I think there is a confusion that many local television stations and some of the tabloid shows and things that you see, they hire people for their looks and their ability to come in and read a teleprompter. That is not the case on the network level.
God knows I'm living proof of that.
That's right. No, you have to be a great journalist before you are ever the anchor of a network television program. And as part of the other part of that question, we have a very rigid control system. We have our own standards and practices within ABC News with a senior vice president who reports directly to me, who has the ability to go to any journalist in our organization and ask who the source was, how do you know this is true, this doesn't seem to be fair. And then we have our lawyers who also look at things if there's any question about legality. So that before we use something like hidden cameras or other techniques that we'll talk about, it has to pass a very rigid in-house set of rules. And normally it is that it's the only way that you can get a story that is of enough importance that the public really should know about it. I know there's been a lot of trivial use of hidden cameras in various places around the country, but we try not to do that. But the story should be so important that it's really of a great magnitude. Number two, you have exhausted most of the regular ways of getting it. And the example that you gave here has been put forward by some people as something that we should have bought some meat and taken it to a lab and had it analyzed. We are looking right now at a situation where people from Food Lion do not believe footage that is right in front of them. So the idea that they would believe that we hadn't concocted some sort of test just doesn't stand up.
Let me go back to some of the
folks. Let me give one more thing, and then
one more. Go ahead.
Then I'll shut up. The other thing that has been suggested is why don't we use people who work within the store and give them a camera and let them go do the shooting for us, and they can bring it out, and that way we wouldn't have to go in and do it ourselves. There are two problems there. Number one, you're never sure what they bring out, how reliable it is, unless it's your own people. In this case, we were very aware that there was a very contentious situation going on with the union. And if we had people from a union bringing footage out that we put on the air and said was valid, that we hadn't validated ourselves, you can imagine the situation we'd be in. And that's why we did that.
As you can see, I have absolutely no trouble keeping my boss brief. Now, go ahead. I'm sure you want to respond to some of that.
I realize that you don't want to retry the case, but I think there are a couple of points that do need to be made. Mr. Arledge makes the comment that he can trust his people when they're in the stores, but he can't trust Food Lion employees for information. I find that to be utterly ridiculous.
I think with all due respect, the point he was making was that since Food Lion and the union were in a dispute, it would be logical for you, if we had used some of the employees who might be sympathetic to the union, it would have been logical for you after the fact then to say, well, what do you expect them to bring out? These guys, after all, are in bed with the union.
Well, it is the case that the people who appeared on the television show themselves, the people whose reports weren't verified by the outtakes, that those people were in litigation, ex-employees sponsored by the union. But my point, Ted, is this. When two ABC employees become Food Lion employees, as these people did, they have a duty under the law to execute their Food Lion jobs. They have a duty to clean. They have a duty to keep sanitary stores. They have a duty to sell in-date product. They cannot just be, as ABC said in the trial, flies on the wall observers. So what was really filmed here, and a large part of this footage, is actually the producers, Lynn Litt and Susan Barnett, filming themselves, not doing their job as Food Lion employees, as they stand and observe people and things not being done. It's an impossible conundrum for anybody investigating a company.
I'm going to resist one more time and not respond to something that you were saying about the case in particular, and just let it sit there so that we can go to one more question before we have to take a break. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that bothers me here is that, you know, we're even discussing why, I mean, it bothers me that the press is responding to the food line as though it's done something wrong. I mean, if we assume in America that we have a democratic society, or at least we're aspiring to one, then the press is really the people's only arm they have to reel in people who break the law, give misinformation to the public. And my question, I guess, to the news side of the panel is, if you take away the camera, or if you take away the journalist's right to go anywhere, don't you subvert the democratic process?
Let me throw that question to Don Hewitt, who has probably been doing this kind of thing in television longer than any of us. How long ago did you start 60 Minutes?
30 years ago.
30 years ago. All right. You want to address that question? I mean, it's sort of a softball, isn't it?
Well, you know, we got a guy on our side. I think one of the problems with this whole discussion here tonight is you got too many vested interests here, right? We all have our own vested interest, and it's going to be difficult to get around that. Hopefully, the senator will get around that.
Don't count on it.
We started doing this many, many years ago, and I never saw anything wrong with it. The only thing I see wrong with it now is I think it's being used, I do think it's being used as a stunt in many, many instances, but I don't see anything wrong with going in, if you can, I don't think people have a right of privacy when they're committing a crime. I don't think people have a right of privacy when they're committing malfeasances. If it were illegal to show somebody a hidden camera committing a crime, then every crook who ever robbed a bank has got a lawsuit because he gets caught on a camera doing it. I don't think you have a right to prohibit anyone from coming into a premise where something illegal may be happening. Now, they claim nothing illegal was happening, and they claim they have the documentation that it was. Let me ask Roon a question.
I'll tell you what, before you do that, because we have to take a break, let me just raise one issue, though, that you're not raising, and that is what these folks over here are claiming, and what the jury, and we have a few members back there, are saying is that ABC broke the law in doing what you say they have a right to do, and I think that's an issue we're going to have to address, but we'll do that when we come back.
Hidden cameras, hard choices. Live from Whitechapel at Wake Forest University in North Carolina, Ted Koppel.
Senator Simpson, is your dog in this fight yet?
Well, I've learned at Harvard, as a visiting lecturer, of course, that, and in the Shorenstein Center, that I'm finding that journalists are getting tougher on themselves than I used to be. And there's got to be a good reason for that, because they know they're failing something with the public, and they are. The public does not hold them in high esteem. I happen to be in a craft or profession that I know how that feels. So you have a situation here which is almost a total disconnect. The American people do not like hidden cameras. They do not like deception. They do not like lying, and that's what this case is about.
Let me stop you one second. Yep. On the one hand, we're being told by some people out here, maybe even some people on this panel, that the reason we're doing it is to get more people to watch us. So people clearly love watching it. They enjoy seeing people caught with their hand in the cookie jar or whatever it may be.
This is what's happened, though. When you have a program like this that comes on in prime time, the reason for that is because it's not news, it's entertainment. And that's what's happened to the whole programs in television. This is not news, this is entertainment, and you're competing for high drama, violence, all the rest of the stuff that goes with prime time. That's what this is about.
Can we address that issue? Diane, take it head on now, this business of what we do sometimes in prime time. It does have to have more than an element of entertainment. I mean, you're competing with entertaining programs. That doesn't mean it's not good journalism.
I don't think being interesting is always entertainment. And you know, Alan, there's something interesting about what we've done with hidden cameras on primetime. Hidden cameras alone don't bring an audience. A topic brings an audience, a topic that the viewing public thinks is of importance. One of our highest is about school violence. Again, topics about congressional junkets, items of importance to the American people. We've had some hidden camera investigations that have had very small audiences comparatively. It's about the topic. Are you doing something that people think relates to, helps, enriches, informs, or in some way improves the life in this country?
Do you buy Senator Simpson's observation that we have lost, if not the confidence, then the esteem of the American public?
I'm going to let you answer that.
It's a very interesting thing, because when this trial was going on and we discussed it, and our assumption was that the jury is going to hate news organizations, that everybody hates journalists and they hate what we do. And we commissioned a poll, and then the media study group commissioned another one just the last 2 days, and it astonished me, to tell you the truth. When it came to trust and integrity, television network magazine programs had an 84% rating, which was the highest there was.
Approval rating.
Approval rating. Local news was 83, network news was 83. The average American was something like 70. Politicians, I regret to say, we're 25.
Oh, no.
But
I'll challenge that.
But my
all right, 26.
My point is that I think there are certain practices in journalism, as there are in anything else, that the American people abhor. And I think basically the American people do not want people lying, nor do we. They don't want deception. And yet, if the subject is big enough, and if the only way you can get at it is with some degree of deception, most people support that. We just showed a statistic here which is lower than I saw earlier today, but it's 42%.
Ron, let me stop you for a moment, because we have several members of the jury back there, including Mr. Mack, who was the foreman of the jury. What were you trying to tell us?
The message that we was trying to send, if you want to call it a message, was basically saying the degree of which that ABC went about getting their hidden camera footage of Food Line was too extensive. It had gone too far. You didn't have boundaries when you started this investigation. Nobody really knew how far they could go with the hidden camera issue because nobody challenged them. What happened was you kept pushing on the edges and pushing on the edges. Finally, a group of